Well, guys, I gotta admit it, KSI, he lost. Now, if you guys were in my whole channel phase back in 2022, 2021, I was huge on covering YouTube boxing. I wasn't huge, but that was my content. And I've obviously made a different turn to more musicals, but I still want to cover this because what a fight this was. I mean, the Prime card did not disappoint. I think that Slim versus Al Poppy, Dean the Great versus Wally Chugs, instant classics. Poppy I thought was gonna win, and then he got knocked out, and I was like, whoa. And then Dean the Great and Wally was a war, and then Dean got wobbled at the end, even though he was beating Wally the entire time. The tag team fight was amazing. I think Wasabi and them need to do a second fight. I think that I want to see all of them fight, but like separately, like individually, because I think Wasabi, Nick LeMayo, Pineda, B-Dave, I think they all have their place in Misfits, and I thought those fights were entertaining, they were good boxing fights, and they represented influencer boxing extremely well. And then we got to the main event, and it was pretty underwhelming. You know, Logan and Dylan fought. Dylan got disqualified. It was a pretty boring fight. I think Logan definitely could have done better, but I definitely think that Dylan wasn't giving anything for Logan to work with, so he became a punching bag. I mean, who would have thought that Dylan Dennis somehow would be worse than Ben Askren? You know what I mean? That's crazy. It's crazy. And then we get into KSI versus Tommy Fury. My personal opinion, for people who have a short attention span, I understand why they gave it to Tommy, and there's a very good argument to make. But having seen the fight again, I think KSI deserved to win by split decision. And if you're gonna give it to Tommy, it should not be by a unanimous decision or a majority decision. And same thing for KSI. It should have either been a split decision for KSI, or you could have given it a split decision for Tommy, or it's a draw. And even when the fight ended, I was like, you know what? Is this gonna be a draw? Because it was a very razor-close fight. And Tommy won because he landed one more punch than KSI. And that is why Tommy won the fight. And that's pretty embarrassing for Tommy. KSI could never lose this fight. If he got knocked out or TKO'd or did worse than Jake did, he would lose. But he went the full 6 rounds with Tommy Fury. His game plan and his strategy actively made Tommy lose, you know, the fundamentals, his jab, his combinations, all that wasn't present. And everyone was like, why? And it's because of KSI's game plan. It was that effective. It was that frazzling and confusing to Tommy, and Tommy didn't know how to figure it out. And for KSI, who took 2 years off of boxing, started in 2017, to do that to someone that's been doing it since they were 6 is impressive, is a win. I know KSI doesn't have the official W, but like he landed big significant shots, and he was more closer to beating Tommy than Jake ever was. Like, there's a good argument to make for KSI winning this. Even, like, the professional sports commentators that aren't, like, DAZN Misfits were saying KSI could win this fight. This was a razor-thin fight. And it goes to show, like I said, that I knew KSI was going to put on a much more effective performance than Jake Paul. I think Tommy and Jake's fight was more entertaining because there was more boxing involved, but I think KSI's game plan proved to be more effective against Tommy Fury, and he gave Tommy more troubles, which I did think was going to happen. And everyone said, Andres, you're biased, you're a fanboy, you're cray. Well, here we are now. And if KSI had landed like one more punch or had one more big moment, he would have won this fight. And that's insane, that KSI was this close to beating Tommy Fury, whereas, you know, Jake was, like, this far off. Like, he was hugely far off. Like, KSI almost beat Tommy on points. Like, let that sink in for a moment, that KSI and Tommy landed, like, one punch less than, KSI landed one punch less than Tommy. Like, let's acknowledge that KSI almost beat Tommy Fury to it by decision. That is embarrassing. The fact that a pro boxer, oh my god, and I think KSI didn't necessarily outbox him as much as he confused him, and because Tommy was so confused, KSI wasn't able to go in and implement his game plan. So again, I think this is only a KSI W in my opinion, and while Tommy won on Saturday, it was a pretty poor win, and his own father said that if KSI won, he wouldn't have any qualms with it. So, if you're a KSI fan, and at least for me, I feel very happy. You know, Tommy didn't blow away KSI. KSI did way better than anyone think, and he did better than Jake, in my opinion. And I think that, that his style was a perfect counter to Tommy Fury's traditional boxing style. Now, there was controversy with the scorecards, and then it was one person didn't do the math right, and all three were having it for Tommy Fury. I don't get that. Everyone gave the second round to Tommy, which is just weird. I gave the first, the second, and the fifth and sixth to KSI. So I gave 4 rounds to KSI, and then 2 rounds to Tommy. Now, people are going to be like, why? Well, if you go back to the 4th round, I would score the 4th round a draw. Like, Tommy won that 3rd round. And at first I was like, Tommy took rounds 3 and 4 and 6. Like, I initially gave 3 rounds to either guy. And I think that's probably the best. But the thing that everyone can get behind for the most part. Most people might say 4 rounds to Tommy, 2 rounds to KSI. But Tommy was initiating the clinching so much in this fight. Listen, KSI was initiating the clinching, he was falling into his shots, but Tommy was doing that way more, and he did some dirty boxing to make it look to the judges like he would go like this, like as if he wasn't doing anything. When he was holding KSI's head so many times, hitting him in the back of the head, when KSI wasn't even going down like this. There's this whole narrative that KSI was responsible for the back of the heads. KSI was standing upright, and I'm going to show you clips and parts of the round in the next section of the video to kind of prove my points. And so I think a lot of this fight was negatively impacted by Tommy. And yeah, I know Tommy was pushing the pace. And from a traditional boxing point of view, if you're a judge, Tommy's style of like moving forward is pushing the pace, whereas with KSI, he's bouncing, he's on the back foot, and then he's blitzing in. But when you think about it, KSI was pushing the pace of the fight in a very unconventional way. But because it was in a way and in a style that no one is used to and no one knows how to judge, they're going to give it to the style that they know, and that's Tommy Fury. I would argue that KSI pushed the pace of this fight more than Tommy did. And Tommy did do a couple of pushing the pacing, but again, KSI would throw a punch, and then Tommy would duck down low and then just put his whole body weight onto KSI, effectively stopping KSI's momentum and allowing KSI to do a lot of clinch work, which the judges might not have looked at, and because they were clinching so much, it was very hard to see who was landing what shots and who wasn't, because it was so close, and then, like, physically they were so close, and then there was, KSI would do the same thing, throw a shot, and then fall into it. He did have a moment in one of the rounds where he threw the shot and then backed out of the way and shifted, and I think if he had done that more, he could have won the fight. I also think that his jabs to the body were highly underutilized by both guys. I think if KSI shifted more and used some of the footwork that he did in his previous fights, went more to the body and had more variation besides just the overhand right, I think he would have gotten the decision. I think he was a little bit one note in his style of fighting. It was effective, but I think there could have been more added to his arsenal, and ultimately I feel like he could have used a lot more tools to his advantage that were there to get that decision over Tommy Fury. Because I think at some point you had to realize, me jumping in, he just clinches, it's the same thing happening again and again and again. I need to try something else, or Tommy should have tried something else too. But KSI showed a lot of improvements in this fight with his footwork, his head movement. I did not think this style of fight was going to work with Tommy. When he came out with his hands down, I was like, oh my god, no. But it works. It works. And it's awesome to see KSI's growth and the fact that this new style is effective. And that, effectively, no boxer is using this style of fight. So yeah, I think that ultimately Tommy, and there was, like, round 4, there was so many moments when he hit KSI on the back of the head. And so I think because, especially in round 4, there was so many instances of him hitting him in the back of the head, holding his head. It's almost comical how much Tommy will grab a hold of KSI's head. And KSI stopped complaining about it after. I would have deducted 2 points from Tommy Fury in that 4th round, because 1, you need to hold him to a higher standard because he is a professional boxer, and I think he was doing this with malicious intent. I mean, KSI's head was there, and he just bangs his head. You know, not even like this, not even down low. So I think just morally, ethically, Tommy didn't deserve to win this fight, based off of those factors. Also, I don't think the judges gave KSI enough credit in this fight, especially in the 2nd round, and I think the last 2 rounds, rounds 5 and 6, were very close, and while Tommy was backing KSI, I do think KSI was keeping the fight going, or at least attempting to, and he was always getting stopped in his tracks by Tommy, and was landing the bigger shots all around the fight. And then John Fury and Tommy saying, you know, KSI felt the right hand and he just clinched. And I'm like, no, your son was doing the clinching all of the time. He would take a huge punch from KSI and put his arm over his head. Like, that's some Logan Paul stuff. The fact that Logan Paul, in his first fight, did more damage and put up a more challenging fight to KSI than Tommy Fury, a pro boxer, is amazing. If you said, okay, Logan Paul, Tommy, who's the pro boxer? If you look at the first Logan Paul fight and this fight, you would think Logan Paul. You would think Logan Paul. And that's insane. That to this day, the toughest fight was Logan Paul, and then Tommy Fury. Like, and that's what I'm sticking with. But again, I understand why Tommy won. I'm not saying that this was a robbery, because I think that is a very strong word to use. It was a very close fight that could have gone either way. And, you know, what was needed was someone needed a decisive knockout, KO, or knockdown, or they needed that one round where they dominated. And there was never, and yeah, KSI dominated, you could say, he won the first 2 rounds, but he didn't dominate Tommy. And Tommy didn't dominate KSI in these messy fights that are terrible to judge. Well, no matter who wins, there's going to be controversy and arguments and feelings of bias and judging and whatever, rigged, whatever. What's needed is a decisive moment, a decisive 2 minutes where one guy you can go, that guy won, and there wasn't that in this fight. Where does KSI go next? I think he will fight probably somebody else. I know Jake's fighting in December. I think the fight between him and KSI is very likely. However, I think Jake might want to take the Tommy fight because he's like, wow, KSI's style actually made Tommy almost lose. What do you think he'd do to me? You know, I think there's a lot of risk with him fighting KSI, and I don't think that he's going to need a lot of convincing. And I wouldn't be surprised if he fought Tommy again. I don't see KSI fighting Tommy again. And if he does, it will probably be after Jake, but I think he's definitely going to want that back. And overall, you know, I think that YouTube boxing is still in a very awesome place. KSI did the community proud. And as a KSI fan, I'm very pleased with his performance. And I think YouTube boxing is only going to get better from here. And we got more of KSI coming. You know, I think that I think KSI versus Jake will happen. It can't happen this year, but I think it will happen in like September to December. So hopefully we'll get that. And at this point, it's kind of getting repetitive. It's getting old. Let's get this KSI v Jake fight on. I don't want to see Tommy Fury again. You know, he goes to a decision. He's found his level. And his legitimacy got tarnished last night. You know, he's not a pro boxer anymore. He's just the highest level in terms of YouTuber boxing. And again, I think if there had been 8 rounds, KSI might have won. We might have had a more decisive win. So overall, I think that Tommy is definitely has to stop labeling himself as the real deal, because he is better than most of these guys. Like, he is better than Jake. Like, the jab, if he has the right tools and he knows how to maneuver his style, he can be very effective and get guys out very well. But I think his legitimacy is definitely been extremely tarnished from that KSI fight. But let me know what you think in the comments. Like, sub, and comment, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.